The biting Alaskan wind whipped through the nascent settlement of Willow Creek, carrying with it the scent of pine and the promise of a long, unforgiving winter. Elias Thorne, a man hardened by years of trapping and solitude, pulled his fur-lined parka tighter as he chopped firewood outside his small, sturdy cabin. His mother, Martha, a widow whose resilience was as vast as the landscape itself, watched him from the doorway, her gaze a mixture of concern and quiet pride. The days were shortening dramatically, each sunset painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples before surrendering to the deep, star-studded black. Elias knew these lands intimately, every crevice, every frozen river, every animal trail. He'd learned to read the subtle signs of nature, a skill vital for survival in a place that offered no second chances. This particular winter felt different, though. A heavy silence had fallen over the usually bustling traplines, and the few prospectors who still ventured out spoke of unnaturally early snows and treacherous ice formations. Elias felt a gnawing unease, a primal warning that whispered from the frosted trees. His focus was always on providing for his mother, ensuring their meager provisions would last until spring. He spent his days checking traps and hunting, returning each evening to the warmth of their hearth, where the crackling fire was their only defense against the encroaching cold. Today, however, he had to make a difficult decision. His trapline, usually reliable, had been yielding less and less. He needed to venture deeper into the more perilous northern territories, a journey he usually reserved for midwinter. The thought of leaving his mother alone, even for a few days, weighed heavily on him, but the alternative was far worse, a winter without enough food. As he sharpened his axe, the metallic rasp echoing in the crisp air, Elias could feel the anticipation of the journey building within him. It was a journey he'd made countless times, but never with this pervasive sense of foreboding. He looked up at the vast, indifferent sky, a canvas of shifting grays, and knew that tomorrow he would face the wilderness head-on. The snow was already piling high against the cabin walls, a silent, relentless siege. He could only hope his preparations were enough. If you're finding this story gripping, make sure to hit that subscribe button to join our community and catch all the chapters. The first rays of dawn painted the eastern sky in muted hues of rose and violet as Elias Thorne set out. His breath plumed in the frigid air, each exhalation a cloud of white against the backdrop of the slumbering wilderness. His sled, laden with essential supplies, dried meat, extra furs, a sturdy rope, and his trusty rifle, crunched over the fresh snow. Martha had stood by the door, her silhouette framed against the warm glow of the cabin's interior, a silent farewell that spoke volumes of her worry. Elias carried that image with him, a constant reminder of why he risked so much. The trail quickly became more challenging. The snow was deeper than anticipated, forcing Elias to push harder, his snowshoes sinking deeper with each step. The silence of the forest was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic creak of his harness and the whisper of the wind through the tall pines. He navigated by instinct and memory, following faint animal tracks and the contours of the frozen landscape. The sun, a pale disk in the distant sky, offered little warmth, and the temperature continued to plummet. By midday, a thin layer of ice had begun to form on his eyelashes. He reached the first marker, a gnarled spruce he'd blazed years ago, and paused to rest. His muscles ached, but his resolve remained unbroken. This was the wild, a place that demanded respect and punished complacency. He meticulously checked his gear, ensuring everything was secure. As he continued, the terrain grew more rugged, with steep inclines and narrow passes. The air grew still, a heavy, oppressive calm that often preceded a shift in the weather. Elias, attuned to these subtle changes, quickened his pace. He needed to reach a sheltered overhang before nightfall, a place where he could build a fire and find some respite from the elements. The thought of the wolves whose tracks he'd seen earlier urged him onward, a primal fear sharpening his senses. As dusk began to settle, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple, Elias spotted the overhang he'd been aiming for. A sense of relief washed over him, quickly followed by a prickle of unease. There, nestled amongst the snow-laden rocks, was a small, crudely built lean-to. Smoke, faint but undeniable, curled from a makeshift chimney. He approached cautiously, rifle held ready. Encounters in these remote parts were rare, and not always friendly. As he drew closer, a figure emerged from the lean-to, a woman, her frame slight but her gaze steady and direct. Her face was smudged with soot, and her worn buckskin clothes spoke of a life lived outdoors. She carried a small bundle of firewood. Elias lowered his rifle slightly, recognizing the universal signs of a lone traveler. She was obviously struggling, her movements slow and deliberate. "Evening," Elias offered, his voice a low rumble in the stillness. The woman flinched, then nodded slowly. "Evening to you too, stranger," she replied, her voice raspy from the cold. "Didn't expect to see another soul out here." She introduced herself as Anya, a trapper from a settlement even further north, her trap lines having failed her as well. Her story mirrored his own, a desperate struggle against the encroaching famine. Elias observed her closely. Her exhaustion was palpable, but there was a flicker of determination in her eyes. He felt a rare pang of empathy. They were two solitary figures, brought together by the harsh realities of the Alaskan winter. He decided to offer what little warmth he could. "Mind if I share your fire for the night? More hands make for a better camp, especially with this cold setting in." Anya nodded, a hint of relief softening her hardened features. The unspoken agreement to share resources, to face the night together, was a common understanding among those who braved the Alaskan wilderness. The next morning, the temperature had plummeted further, and a fresh blanket of snow covered the landscape, obscuring familiar landmarks. Elias and Anya, after a shared meal of dried venison and warm tea, decided to continue together. Their common plight had forged a fragile alliance. Anya, though weary, possessed an impressive knowledge of the northern terrain, having traversed it for years. Elias, with his strength and experience in tracking, complemented her expertise. The journey was arduous. The snow, now hip-deep in places, made every step a struggle. The wind howled, carrying stinging shards of ice that bit at their exposed skin. Visibility dropped to mere yards, turning the familiar forest into a disorienting labyrinth of white. They moved slowly, carefully, their movements synchronized, each watching out for the other. Elias noticed Anya's labored breathing and the slight tremor in her hands. She was clearly at her limit, pushing through sheer willpower. "We need to find a more sheltered path," Elias shouted over the wind, pointing towards a ridge that offered some protection from the relentless gusts. Anya nodded, her face pale. As they ascended the slippery slope, the ice underneath the snow became more treacherous. Elias led the way, testing each step before Anya followed. The silence between them was not one of discomfort, but of intense focus, a shared understanding of the dangers that surrounded them. The very air felt heavy with the threat of unseen dangers, of a misstep that could lead to catastrophe. They were pushing their luck, driven by the desperate hope of finding game, of securing enough food to survive the long, cruel winter. The thought of failure, of returning to their homes empty-handed, was a constant chilling companion. The snow continued to fall, relentless and silent, erasing their tracks almost as soon as they were made. Don't miss a single moment of this intense journey. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you're always the first to know when a new chapter drops. They had been traversing a narrow, snow-laden ridge for what felt like hours, the wind relentlessly biting at their exposed skin. Elias, leading the way, carefully tested each foot placement, the thin crust of ice over the snow making every step precarious. Anya followed closely behind, her breathing ragged, her focus solely on the path Elias created. The world had dissolved into a blurry canvas of white and grey. Suddenly, without warning, the snow beneath Anya's feet gave way. A guttural cry escaped her lips as she plunged downward. Elias, reacting instantly, spun around, his hand reaching out, but it was too late. He heard the sickening crunch of breaking ice and the muffled thud as she disappeared from view. A chilling silence followed, broken only by the howling wind. His heart seized in his chest. "Anya!" he roared, scrambling to the edge of the chasm. The ravine was deep, a jagged tear in the earth, its walls slick with ice and dark shadows. He peered into the gloom, his eyes straining to pierce the darkness. He could just make out her form, crumpled at the bottom, a twisted heap against the pristine white snow. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through his carefully cultivated stoicism. He knew the dangers of such falls: broken bones, internal injuries, the rapid onset of hypothermia in this unforgiving cold. He quickly assessed the situation, his mind racing through possibilities. He had rope, but getting down to her, and more importantly, getting her out, would be an immense challenge. The walls of the ravine were almost vertical, and the biting cold was already a formidable enemy. He called out again, his voice echoing eerily. A faint moan reached him, a fragile sound that filled him with both dread and a desperate surge of hope. She was alive. Now the impossible task of bringing her out began. With grim determination, Elias secured one end of his sturdy climbing rope around a thick, ice-coated spruce tree. The bark, rough beneath his gloved fingers, offered purchase, but the layer of rime ice made the task treacherous. He checked the knot twice, then a third time, each pull a silent prayer against failure. His hands, already numb with the relentless cold, ached with the effort, but the thought of his mother Martha waiting for him fueled a burning resolve. Anya's life now depended entirely on him, a responsibility that settled heavily in his gut. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Elias began his descent into the frozen maw of the ravine. His heavy, fur-lined boots sought precarious footholds on the slick, icy ledges, each movement deliberate, a slow, careful dance with gravity and the unforgiving elements. He lowered himself inch by agonizing inch, the rope biting into his hands, the cold seeping into his very bones. The air at the bottom of the ravine was even colder, a still, heavy blanket that seemed to press in on him. The meager light from above barely penetrated, casting long, eerie shadows that danced like spectral figures on the ice-slicked walls. He reached Anya, who lay motionless, a crumpled heap against the pristine snow, her face an ashen mask against the stark white. He knelt beside her, his breath fogging in thick clouds in the frigid air, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. "Anya, can you hear me?" he whispered, his voice thick with a raw concern he rarely allowed himself to show. She stirred, a pained, guttural gasp escaping her lips. Her eyes fluttered open, clouded with a disoriented pain and confusion, a flicker of life in their depths that brought a surge of desperate hope to Elias. He quickly, expertly assessed her injuries. Her right leg was clearly broken, twisted at an unnatural, horrifying angle beneath her buckskin trousers. A dark, spreading stain on the fabric confirmed a deeper injury. A deep, jagged gash marred her forehead, bleeding sluggishly, the stark red against her pale skin a shocking testament to her fall. Hypothermia was already setting in. Her exposed skin was dangerously cold to the touch, a harbinger of the grim fate that awaited them if he didn't act immediately. Elias knew he had to act fast, every second a precious commodity. With practiced hands, he carefully removed his own heavy coat, its thick furs a vital barrier against the cold, and spread it over her, offering what little warmth he could, a silent promise of survival. "We'll get you out of here," he murmured, his voice firm, though his heart hammered a furious rhythm against his ribs, a desperate drumbeat against the impending doom. He began to fashion a makeshift splint for her leg, his hands moving with desperate urgency. He broke sturdy branches from a small, frost-covered pine that had clung to the ravine wall, using strips of cloth torn from his pack to secure them. The pain contorted Anya's face into a mask of agony, but she remained remarkably silent, her eyes fixed on his, a silent, desperate plea for survival reflected in their depths. Elias worked quickly, his movements precise despite the biting cold and the overwhelming urgency of the situation. He knew the coming hours would test his limits, pushing him to endure in ways he had never imagined. Splinting Anya's leg was an agonizing process, each manipulation sending a wave of pain through her, but Elias worked with grim efficiency. His rudimentary medical knowledge, gleaned from years of living in the isolated wilderness and tending to his own injuries, proved invaluable. He tore strips from his own spare shirt, the rough fabric a stark contrast to the raw wound, meticulously crafting bandages to wrap her head wound tightly. Anya, though pale as the surrounding snow and shivering violently, held remarkably still, her occasional moans the only betraying signs of her immense pain. Once she was as stable as he could make her, secured in the makeshift splint and bandaged, Elias faced the daunting, almost impossible reality, getting her out of the ravine. The climb back up was steeper and infinitely more perilous than the descent had been. He had to be her anchor, her unwavering support. With meticulous care, he tied the rope securely around her waist, then carefully positioned her on his back, her limp body a dead weight against his own. Her weight, combined with the extreme soul-numbing cold and the treacherous icy footing, was immense. Each upward pull was a Herculean effort, his muscles screaming in protest, already pushed beyond their limits. The icy walls offered little purchase for his boots, and his hands, already raw and bleeding from the descent, grew numb, threatening to lose their grip. He pushed through the searing pain, fueled by an adrenaline-laced, almost desperate determination. The enduring image of his mother Martha waiting for him, worried sick in their warm cabin, flashed in his mind, then Anya's pale, pained face, a fragile life depending on his every strained breath. He couldn't fail. He wouldn't. Hours crawled by, each minute stretching into an eternity of brutal effort. He would ascend a few feet, then brace himself against the icy wall, resting his burning muscles for agonizing moments before attempting the next upward movement. Anya, barely conscious, was a heavy, unresponsive burden, but Elias felt a fierce, almost primal protectiveness for her. He talked to her constantly, his voice a low, steady rumble against the wind's howl, even though he knew she couldn't fully comprehend him. He described the warmth of his cabin, the comforting crackle of the fire, the taste of hot broth, anything to conjure an image of comfort and survival, to keep their spirits, however dimly, flickering. Finally, with a monumental, guttural surge of strength that seemed to draw from the very depths of his being, he hauled them over the rim of the ravine, collapsing onto the snow, gasping for breath, Anya still strapped securely to his back. The immediate ordeal was over, but the greater challenge remained. They were out of the ravine but still miles from home, with a severely injured woman and a raging winter storm threatening to descend upon them. Exhaustion, a heavy, suffocating blanket, threatened to consume Elias, but the urgent critical condition of Anya spurred him onward. He carefully unstrapped her from his back, a wave of dizzying fatigue washing over him, making the world swim. He needed to find a way to transport her, a method that would allow him to continue through the deep snow. With the resourcefulness born of wilderness survival, he improvised a crude travois, using 2 sturdy branches from a fallen, snow-laden tree and some extra rope from his pack, fashioning a sling where Anya could lie, as comfortable as possible. He then painstakingly pulled her across the snow, the drag heavy and relentless, each step a testament to his fading strength. The snow continued to fall, heavier now in thick, relentless flakes, obscuring the landscape and making navigation incredibly difficult. The biting wind had picked up, whipping stinging shards of ice at their faces and making every breath a burning, agonizing effort. Elias focused on one painful, deliberate step after another, his eyes constantly scanning for any familiar landmark, any subtle shift in the terrain that would confirm he was still on the right path. He conserved his remaining food, offering Anya small sips of melted snow from his canteen when she was conscious enough to swallow, her lips barely parting. He spoke to her, not expecting a reply, but to keep himself company against the vast, oppressive silence of the storm, his voice a low, comforting hum in the desolate wilderness. His body screamed for rest, every muscle a burning protest, but he knew stopping for too long meant succumbing to the insidious cold, a surrender he could not afford. He remembered the chilling stories of other trappers, lost to the unforgiving Alaskan winter, their bodies found months later perfectly preserved, monuments to the wild's indifference. That would not be his fate, nor Anya's. He kept moving, a lone, determined silhouette against the swirling white, dragging his precious cargo, a living testament to the stubborn resilience of the human spirit. The only warmth he felt was the deep burning ache in his muscles and the fierce, unwavering determination in his heart, a fire against the encroaching frost. The blizzard hit with full, terrifying force during the night, a relentless whiteout that utterly consumed the world, reducing visibility to mere feet. Elias had managed to find a shallow cave, offering some minimal, meager shelter from the immediate brunt of the wind, but the icy gusts howled like a banshee, and fine snow drifted in, quickly covering their meager refuge in a fresh layer of white. He huddled over Anya, using his own body heat, what little he had left, to keep her warm, his thick fur coat doing little against the plummeting temperatures that felt like a physical assault. Her breathing was shallow and ragged, each breath a struggle, and her skin was icy to the touch, despite his desperate efforts. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that she was fading. He rubbed her hands and feet, desperate to stimulate circulation, his fingers raw and clumsy with cold. He whispered words of encouragement, memories of spring, of green valleys and warm sunshine, of life returning to the frozen land. He thought of his mother, of her steadfast love and unwavering faith in him, a silent anchor in his mind. He knew she would be worried sick, imagining the worst, picturing his demise in the unforgiving wilderness. He had to get Anya to safety, not just for her sake, but for his mother's peace of mind, to prove that he could overcome this seemingly insurmountable challenge, that hope was not lost. As dawn approached, a faint, almost imperceptible lightening of the sky through the swirling snow, Elias knew he couldn't stay. The blizzard showed no signs of abating, a relentless force of nature, and their supplies were dwindling fast, threatening their very survival. He had to keep moving, even through the blinding, suffocating storm. With a monumental effort, he resecured Anya to the travois, the effort draining his last, precious reserves of strength. With a grim, determined set to his jaw, he pushed out into the maelstrom. Visibility was practically zero, a suffocating wall of white, and he relied solely on his innate sense of direction, honed by years in the wild, and the subtle shifts in the wind to guide him. Every few minutes, he would stop, close his eyes and visualize the path home, imprinting it onto his weary mind, a mental map against the chaos. The world was a white blur, a frozen hell, but deep within him, a tiny ember of hope flickered, refusing to be extinguished, a defiance against the Alaskan winter. Just when Elias thought his legs would give out completely, when every muscle screamed in protest and his mind threatened to surrender, a faint, familiar scent reached him. Wood smoke. It was a scent that spoke of warmth, safety, and home, cutting through the biting cold and the smell of pine. He pushed harder, a sudden, powerful surge of adrenaline coursing through his veins, igniting a last, desperate burst of energy. Through the swirling, blinding snow, he saw it, the faint, indistinct outline of his cabin, a small, sturdy beacon of warmth and safety in the vast, unforgiving white expanse. He stumbled forward, dragging the travois and its precious cargo, his last reserves of strength expended in this final, desperate, agonizing push. Martha, alerted by the frantic, insistent barking of their faithful dog, burst from the cabin door, her face etched with weeks of worry and sleepless nights. Her eyes widened, first in disbelief, then in overwhelming relief, at the sight of Elias, snow-caked and gaunt, pulling the injured Anya behind him. Tears welled in her eyes, a mixture of profound relief that he was alive and piercing fear at Anya's condition. Without a word, a testament to their deep, unspoken bond, she rushed to them, her strong, calloused hands immediately helping Elias carefully bring Anya inside. The immediate warmth of the cabin enveloped them, a stark, comforting contrast to the unforgiving cold and the raging blizzard outside. Inside, by the comforting crackle of the fire, Martha, with her years of frontier experience and practical knowledge, immediately took charge. She boiled water over the flames. Her movements swift and efficient, cleaned Anya's wounds with practiced hands, and applied soothing salves made from local herbs she'd gathered and prepared. Elias, having finally collapsed onto a rough wooden stool, watched, his body trembling violently with exhaustion, but his heart filled with an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Anya, though still weak and pale, was safe. Over the next few weeks, under Martha's diligent, compassionate care, Anya slowly, painstakingly began to recover. Her leg would heal, though it would be a long, arduous process, a constant reminder of the ordeal. The bond between the three, forged in the brutal crucible of the Alaskan winter, deepened into an unbreakable trust, a silent understanding of shared survival. Elias had not only saved a life, he had brought a new light into their solitary world, a profound reminder that even in the harshest of conditions, humanity, compassion, and resilience could prevail against all odds. The winter continued to rage outside, its icy grip still strong, but inside their small cabin, the warmth of hope burned brighter than ever, a testament to their enduring spirit.